Hey, this is Ari, and in this video, I want to share with you a little clip from one of my recent interviews with Dr. Mercola, who is a good friend of mine, who is also somewhat of a childhood idol of mine. I've been following his work since I was a teenager, since I was 16 or 17 years old, over 20 years ago. And I highly recommend it. This was a power-packed interview, and you'll see why in this little clip. And if you want to listen to the full-length interview, which I highly recommend, the link for that is down in the description below. Enjoy.
If we weren't, we didn't have the ability to generate ketones, usually through not eating for a while, typically for a day or two, for most people. If we did not have that ability, anyone would not be here. We would not be on the planet. Our ancestors would have never survived. So it's incumbent upon, it's a capacity that our species has essentially developed has always had. And the problem is we lose that capacity as we ignore basic ancestral nutritional common sense. We're essentially, violating the time-restricted eating guidelines. And then by choosing poor foods. So the ketones are essentially water-soluble fats. They're very short molecules, usually 2, 3, or 4 carbons. And the benefit of them being so small is that they easily penetrate through pretty much all the cell membranes, including your blood-brain barrier. And they can be metabolized quite readily as alternative source of fuel, as an alternative to glucose. Now, in the context of COVID-19, it's particularly important to understand that I think everyone's heard the term cytokine storm, and that these cytokines are signaling molecules that get generated usually under episodes of acute inflammation. So one of the consequences of cytokine storm is that it shuts down your body's ability to make a really important biomolecule, which is called NADPH. And I've watched, as have you, I'm sure, maybe many hundreds of podcasts now in the last few weeks or months on this topic. And I really haven't heard anyone addressing this. Even though there's a number of people talking about the oxidative stressors, and although it's relatively small, they're usually talking about other topics. And this is an important component because NADPH is essentially your body's battery. And it serves as a reservoir of electrons. And what these reservoir does is it recharges your endogenous antioxidants, things like glutathione and vitamin C and vitamin E. So once those molecules get used once and they donate their electrons, then they're useless. And sometimes even worse than useless, they're actually dangerous until they get recharged. And NADPH is what does the recharging.
So real quick, what's the distinction between NADPH and NAD+, which maybe a lot of people have heard of as people are talking about nicotinamide riboside and,
Yeah, there's a kinase. I think it's NADP kinase. I forget the exact enzyme, but a kinase is an enzyme that essentially attaches to phosphate, and the only difference is that there's a phosphate attached to the NAD. So you have NADP, and then the H means that it's reduced already, so it's a source of electrons. So they're cousins. They're in the same family. They're the great controlling nucleotides, which are the 4, NADPH, NADH, NAD+, and NADH. And then you've got coenzyme A, acetylcoenzyme A, which is the other. So there's 5 controlling nucleotides. And the reason I preface that is because, I want to explain some complex molecular biology and, what the hell is he going on about this for? Well, there's a practical importance of it because, like I said, the COVID-19, well, I didn't say it. It's COVID-19, when you have the cytokine storm, it suppresses, but let me just preface this earlier. When you're eating food, you typically, the primary sources of calories are either carbohydrates or fat that you're going to burn as fuel in your mitochondria. And those, you don't burn those directly. They're broken down to their constituent molecules. And what are those constituent molecules? Well, in the case of glucose, it's pyruvate. Pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule, that essentially gets further metabolized to carbon dioxide and acetyl-CoA, and then it gets shuttled into the mitochondria, into the electron transport chain. Similarly, the fatty acids get broken down to acetyl-CoA and they get shuttled in there. So and most people are relying on glucose, especially those with comorbidities that COVID-19. They're already insulin resistant. These people cannot metabolize fat. They are not generating ketones. That's one of the reasons they're so sick. So their primary and almost only source of fuel is glucose. So what that means, they have to use pyruvate. If they can't break down pyruvate, they're in bad shape. And that's exactly what's happening, because these cytokines, they inhibit the enzyme that is responsible for metabolizing the pyruvate, this pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. And then they get backed up. And when that gets backed up, they cannot make this molecule, NADPH, which essentially is the antidote for all the inflammation that's being generated from this virus. So they're just, it's no surprise that they're dropping like flies from this. It's exactly what you would predict. It's really is it's a perfect prescription for metabolic disaster, what this COVID-19 is. But if you understand the basics, you can bypass it. So how do you bypass this thing? Hyperbaric oxygen does it in spades, but not everyone's going to have access to that. And certainly not going to have access if they want to do a CT scan.
And it also, just to tie things back in, it also relates to exercise and blood flow restriction training,
yes.
Cultivating metabolic flexibility. It also relates in a massive way to time-restricted eating. So just connecting the dots for people listening.
Yeah. So, but acutely, so ionizing radiation exposure, acute ischemic stresses such as a stroke, TBI, heart attack, the same intervention I'm going to describe can be used in all those situations with incredible benefits, because what you have in these ischemic scenarios is this massive oxidative stress that's causing the damage, and you need an antidote at a biochemical molecular level to compensate for that stress. And NADPH is how you do it. So you want to have your body make it. And if you're impaired because of this inflammation, which is similar in many of these other conditions, not so much systemically as it is in COVID, but certainly at a local level, then the way to bypass that is by providing ketones to your body. And ketones bypasses this, essentially shuttles in to the next step where the acetyl-CoA enters the Krebs cycle from the pyruvate, and the ketones go in directly and can generate the NADPH, as a result bypass that temporary metabolic dysfunction that the COVID-19 and these other scenarios are generating on the body. So it's a marvelous solution. And one of the ways you can do it is the things we were talking about before is to do it endogenously through your body's efforts. So that clearly is ideal. But you can also take, there's another strategy, something called an exogenous, which means it's outside your body, ketone. And the exogenous ketones consist of two types. There's salts or esters. The salts are somewhat problematic because they have a really high solute load, which would be sodium, magnesium, or other ions, which can be problematic. So the esters are clearly the best and most efficient way to do that. And the only problem with them is they're a little bit pricey. They're about $1 a gram, and you might need, a gram is about an ml. So you might need 25, 30, 50 grams of this for a therapeutic dose.
Per dose? Is that one dose per day, or how many doses per day?
Well, since it's not something you be taking all the time, you take into those scenarios where you need it. Like for you, like when I had my CT cone scan, I will, first of all, carbohydrates will limit your body's ability to make ketones nutritionally. So you want to limit your carbs, usually below 50 grams a day for a while. And then you'll be making more of your own. The other thing you can do is use things like medium chain triglycerides, or specifically even better C8, which is even shorter. And that will help convert to ketones even better. So I typically have about 6 ounces of C8 a day, and a relatively low carbohydrate diet. So when I had that as a base, and I take these esters, like before my CT scan, I took about, I think 30 cc's of the esters, and I got my ketones up to 5. Have you ever measured a ketones, Ari?
I haven't, no. And in
Okay.
fact, I just had several homemade blueberry muffins right before we started
No.
this interview. So I am not in ketosis
No,
right now.
I can guarantee you, don't waste the money and get your ketones, or the pain and get your ketones. But if you're going to measure keto, the best, most accurate way is with your blood. And there's a really interesting test. It's called Keto Coach, all one word, X.com, or you can go to Amazon and find them. And it's like, I think it's like only 50 cents a strip, because most of these strips first came out, they were like $4 or $5 a strip, for every test. And that gets kind of pricey.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot better when it's under $1.
Yeah.
So if you want to know what they are, it's really interesting. But so most people, like if you are under 0.5, I can guarantee you're probably undetectable at this point.
Right now, post blueberry muffin binge.
Yeah, it's not that they're bad. No, it's not like not being in ketosis isn't healthy. Absolutely not. You should not be in ketosis continuously. But when you want to have the therapeutic benefits and get the NADPH up to counteract this oxidative stress, that's when you want to kind of modulate things in that direction.
Got it. So I want to, there's a lot of complex biochemistry that you went into there. I want to try to see if we can simplify it. So basically in a state where you are, where somebody's a carb burner and they have no metabolic flexibility, the typical person who's eating tons of refined and processed carbs and way too many carbs, and for way too long during each day, they're time restricted. They don't have a time restricted feeding window. They might be feeding 12 to 16 hours a day.
Yeah, like most people.
These people are going to be likely metabolically inflexible, not have an ability to tap into stored fat for fuel, and insulin resistant. And that's going to lead to what at the biochemistry level to that increases their likelihood of severe symptoms or death. It's decreased NAD.
Well, because their glucose levels is high and they're relatively insulin resistant, those are two prescriptions that inhibit your body's ability to create ketones. So just that very nature. Now, additionally, when you're burning carbohydrates as your primary fuel, there's an additional artifact of that process that I neglected to mention, and that is that very process of burning glucose as opposed to ketones is metabolically inefficient. So it intrinsically is 30% more inefficient. By inefficient, I mean that there's an excess, there's a surplus of a leakage of electrons out of the normal sequence of events that actually contributes to more reactive oxygen species, more oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. So because you're burning fuel inefficiently, it's like a dirty fuel, essentially. Now, it's not bad fuel, and you need to be able to use it. I mean, you'd be very impaired if you could not burn glucose. I mean, you have to have it, but when you're burning it continuously, that is not a good strategy.
Hey, this is Ari. I hope you enjoyed this video. And one more thing before you go. Actually, two more things. One is, if you enjoyed this particular little clip, the link to the full-length podcast is in the description down below. So make sure to check that out. Also, one more thing. Let me ask you a question. What if I could show you how to double your energy levels and dramatically improve your brain function, reducing your anxiety and depression to a degree on par with antidepressant drugs, but without the side effects? Sound pretty interesting? Well, there are, in fact, numerous compounds that can do this, that have been shown to do this. And I'll take you through just a few of these very briefly. One of them is rhodiola rosea. And this has been shown in studies, rhodiola rosea extract in people with stress-related fatigue and exhaustion, to cut their levels of fatigue and brain fog in half in less than a month. Just this one compound. There's another compound in my formula Energenesis called NT factor phospholipids that's been shown to help repair mitochondrial membranes and mitochondrial health to the level of healthy 29-year-olds, taking people with deteriorated mitochondria who are over the age of 65, restoring it to the level of healthy 29-year-olds. And that has been shown in numerous studies in various types of chronic fatigue, aging-associated chronic fatigue, obesity-related chronic fatigue syndrome, to increase energy levels by 30 to 45% in the span of 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the specific study. So dramatic improvements in a very, very short period of time. 2 more compounds that are amazing, I highly recommend, that are in my formula, Ultra Brain, along with Rhodiola rosea. Saffron extract. This has been shown to increase levels of, improve your mood, I should say, and decrease levels of depression on par with fluoxetine, which is Prozac. And not only that, but with fewer side effects. It's much safer and much less likely to cause negative effects than antidepressant drugs are. Acetyl L-carnitine is another compound that's been shown to dramatically improve brain health in older adults. It also improves energy levels in older adults with chronic fatigue by between 40 to 50% in just the span of 2 to 4 months. And the last thing I'll mention here is acetyl L-carnitine has also been compared to antidepressant drugs and been shown, like saffron, to be as effective as antidepressant drugs in combating depression, but without the harmful side effects that so often occur with the drugs. So this is just a small sampling of the over 35 compounds that are in my formulas, Energenesis and Ultra Brain, that are all proven to dramatically improve energy levels, mitochondrial health, and brain health, and much, much more. And I highly recommend that you go check these out. If you're struggling with depression or anxiety or brain fog, if you're struggling with stress-related exhaustion and burnout, if you're struggling with chronic fatigue, go check out these formulas, give them a shot. I promise you are going to be blown away by the results. And like I said, the science has already proven that these things work. So you don't have to just take my word for it. There's lots of research to support that, and I'll even link to some of that research down below so you can verify everything that I just said for yourself. So the links to those studies will be in the description for this video down below. So check them out. Check out the formulas on theenergyblueprint.com. Again, Energenesis is the mitochondrial formula, and Ultra Brain is our brain formula. Check them out, try them out, and I think you're going to be blown away by the results. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you again soon.